had started in the last class the revision of second unit. So in this, what we are doing is process management and mutual exclusion. So what is process? Process is where how do we execute anything. It may be anything. Now I have opened a PPT. Now I have opened a Google Meet. So how this should start? First we start with the computer, and there within the computer we have an operating system where it will be managing everything. So that's what here, this process, how this process, it is one part of the computer. So where it will be managing all other parts. It's a software where it will be managing complete your PPTs, whatever it is, whatever softwares you are, someone has to manage. So in that case, in this unit we'll be learning how we are going to manage. And in the last class, we have seen about what is process, what are the process, what is PCB, how do we identify, what are the different states, then what is a state transition diagram, what is a queuing diagram, creation termination of the process, then reason for process termination, then process states, so single blocked queue, multi-blocked queue, so suspended queue, process description, how do we describe the process, and process control structure, so how do we control the process. Then we have seen about process control, process creation we have seen, process switching also we have seen in the last class. So we have to start from here. So next is change of process states. So suppose now we are in the starting state of my OS class. So after that, after half an hour, I'll be somewhere in some topic. So there are the different states change from one state to another state. So how are these? The steps involved in the changes of the process states are as below. Save context of processor including program, counter and other registers. Update the process control block of the process that is currently in the running state. Move process control block to appropriate queue ready. Either it can be a queue ready or blocked or ready or suspended. Select any process for execution. Update the process control block of the process selected. Update memory management data structure. Restore context of the selected process. So this is what is called as a change of process state. Execution of the operating system. We normally say that OS is also software. Hence the question is, if the OS is just a collection of program, and if it is executed by the processor, just like any other program. So how do we run? You have so many programs, right? You would have done at least in second semester, data structure, Java, C. So how do you execute? We require some compiler. Same way here, even the operating system also required to run any program. So that's what is the operating system says to us. If so, how it is controlled? So how we are controlling? So how to start, which program to first be present, which one should be second, all these should be controlled by someone. So that is what here execution of the operating system. How it is controlled, who and what controls it, these aspects are discussed here. So next we have something called as a non-process kernel. So the traditional approach of OS execution is to execute the kernel of the OS outside any process. Here the OS has its own memory region and own system stack. Hence, the concept of process is applied only to user program and OS code to execute as separate entity that operates in a privileged mode. So here in this case, what we do, execution with the user process. How do the user process? That's what here. Now you are doing executing a Java program or you are executing a DS program. So how that should work? So that is also one process. Another approach of an OS execution is to execute the OS within the user process as shown in the figure. We'll see in the next slide how do we execute. Here, there is no need of process switch to run an OS routine. This approach is common in small computer like PC and workstation. Process-based OS can be treated as a collection of system process. So what is OS? It's a collection of system process. Not only system, even the user programs are also there. So collection of all these so that you can communicate or someone can control. As in other options, the software that is part of the kernel executes in the kernel mode. But major kernel functions are organized as separate process. So this approach has several advantages. It imposes a modular OS with minimal clean interface between the modules. Some non-critical OS functions are conveniently implemented as a separate process. Implementing the OS as a set of process is useful in a multi-processor or multi-computer environment in which some of the OS service can be shifted out to a dedicated processor, improving performance. So here we can see in this diagram how the relationship between the operating system and the user processor. So then separate kernel. So this is one separate kernel, P1, P2, etc., Pn. So then, whereas in that case, you can see the kernel is distributed or common to all the processor. Whereas in the second diagram, we can see that the operating system is separated for each process. So in the second diagram, we can see P1 is also having a separate operating system. P2 is also having a separate operating system. Like that, whatever the processors we have created will be having a separate operating system. So then P1, P2, etc., Pn or OS1, OS2 like that. So that's what in the second diagram where each processor has a separate operating system. Whereas in this case, the OS function executes as a separate process. So P1, P2, etc., P3, then OS1, OS2 like that we have so many things. So that is what the relationship between the OS and the user process. So this is what is called as a operating system and the user process. Then what is the security issues? So now we are meeting in a Google Meet. How far we are secured that no one is listening to our class or no one is hacking your details, personal details, or no one is using anything from my system, my computer, because we are on the internet. So that's what here we have to keep track of security issues. An OS associates a set of privileges with each process. These privileges indicates what resources the process may access, including region of the memory, files, privileged system instruction, and so on. So this is what is a security issues. So typically, the highest level of privilege is referred to as an administrator, supervisor, or a root access. Who will be having highest privileges? So generally, who is operating it? So the operating, what we call in this is administrator, or we call it as a supervisor, or in Unix terms, we call it as a root. So these are the highest privileges will be given, so that I can say whether I can give a control to you or not. I should ask you anything or like that. This is what the administrator will be doing, anything. So now you are doing your mini project. Then you say the administrator will log in, administrator will do this, will go from login page to other page. So like that, this is what the first security thing will be there. Then root access provides access to all the functions and services of the operating system. So the main administrator is responsible for accessing all the services of the operating system. A key security issue in the design of an OS is to prevent, analyze from the gaining unauthorized privileges on the system, especially from a gaining root access. So different types of threats to the OS and the respective countermeasures are discussed below. Then system access threats fall into two categories. One is introducer, massacre, and mischief. So what we do here is system access threat. So now, how did you access into this Google Meet? I have to send you some link. If you have that link, then only you can log in into my class. Same way here also, what we do, how the system can access the threads. So here we have some categories, hackers or cracker. So what is this hacker? So that's what I told, unauthorized. Now I have invited only second semester MCA students. So now 6 semesters cannot attend my class because I have not sent them any invitation. So now suppose if there is one person who is hacking all these things, so that's what is called as a hacker. So there are three classes of introducers. One is an individual who is not authorized to use the computer and who prevents a system's access control to exploit a legitimate user accounts. So what do we do here? Threads. So how do we access all this? Then a legitimate user who accesses data, program, or resources for which such access is not authorized, or who is unauthorized for such access but misuses his or her privileges. Then what are the individual C's or a supervisor control? What is a control given? That's what I told. Initially, for any project, anything, the first main person will be the who is creating that software. So then what generally we do, we give some name called as an administrator. So that's what here supervisor will be having the first control. Then what are the malicious softwares? There are so many malicious softwares where some vulnerabilities can be introduced in your computing system. And what are the measures we have to take? Suppose if someone is hacked, that's what some days before, initially when we have started with the online classes, we were using a Zoom. So then what everyone started, whether it is true or not, we don't know, but we came to know that Zoom has been hacked. Zoom is not authorized. Means anybody can hack. It was so that's the reason we stopped and we started using Google. Same way here also, what is the measures we are going to take? So what are the countermeasures we are going to take? Following are the different ways of facing the security threats. So intrusion detection system are typically designed to detect human intruder and malicious software behaviors. They may be host or network based. So intrusion detection system IDS typically comprises sensor, analyzer, then user interface. That's what is called as a countermeasures. What is authentication? So user authentication is a basic building block for defense consisting of two steps, identification and verification. So there are four ways of authenticating a user identification. How do we authenticate? We have different ways of authentication. So something the individual know. So like your password. So now if I start saying that if I want to enter, we generally know your mail IDs. So I may know the mail ID of Mithili, I may know the mail ID of Amrish, but still I cannot log in into your accounts. Why? Because there it is secured. Until unless you give me your passwords, I cannot enter. So that is one first state where authentication will be there. After you give your correct password, then only it will verify whether you are the same person or not. Then individual process. So now suppose you think that you want to enter into BMSIT college. Then what you should have? You should have a college ID. So that's what here authentication says to us. So the same way, like suppose we are the staff, we have to come. So every day we also will be monitored. Like you have your attendance in the same way, even not only colleges, everywhere, because they have to be monitored, no, who has come which day, who is on leave, all those things. So in that case, here even in our college, we have something called as a biometric. So what type of biometric it is? It is a static biometric like fingerprint. So what we have to do is we have to keep a finger into that so that it will take automatically at what time I have come to college, what minutes, what all the details will be there. So this is one way of authentication. So another way is like there are so many different static biometrics things. One is fingerprint, what we practically use in our college. So now because of COVID-19, we also stopped using from March. We have also stopped using the fingerprint. Why? Because if one touches the biometric, and because so many employees are there in the PMSIT, and if suppose if one person turn to be positive and the other person touches, maybe it may spread. That's the reason we have stopped. Same way, we have to think of other alternative. Now, what is the other alternative we have? We have a iris. So, what is this iris? And I have to stand in front of the mirror camera. Then it will identify my iris, and then it will take the attendance. There are so many ways of authentication. These are some of them. So then something like the individual does. So dynamic biometric. Maybe you would have seen that. You would have watched some movies where a blind hero will be doing all the process. Then how he is doing? Using a Google Speak. Same way here also we have like voice. Also is one way of authentication. I think you would have seen some videos in the Facebook where somewhere in some country where one person has locked his home with the his voice. I mean, authentication there was locking for his house is his voice. He has locked and he went back, and he was having a toothache, and he has removed that tooth, and he was having a pain in his mouth, and he'll come back to home and he starts speaking, but it is not opening. Why it is not opening? Because uh, before when he logged it and after, the voice are different. Why is it is but the same person, but it is different? Why? Because he was having a pain in his mouth, so now it is not opening. So like this we have so many advantages and disadvantages even for each of the authentication devices. Then access control. So it implements a security policy to indicate who, what can access each resource. A security administrator maintains an authorization database. So the access control functions consults this to determine whether to grant access, and audit functions monitors and keeps a record of user access to a system user. That's what is called as a access control. Then firewall. Traditionally, a firewall is a dedicated computer that interface with computer outside a network, has special security precautions built into it to protect sensitive files on computers within the network. So then what is this firewall? Same way now let us assume that when we come to BMSIT college, we are allowed to access our internet. Even you people also given, you can also access by using the authentication. So when we are using authentication, that's fine. Then what is that step? That says that, okay, you're the student or employee of a BMSIT. After that, what the BMSIT will bring, suppose some channel, some videos you're not supposed to access, they would have blocked. So initially we would have seen that Facebook was blocked somewhere, dot this. How they are doing, that's what is called as a firewall. So that they don't want anything. Now you can just take your any companies. So even in companies also, they'll block so many sites so that the employee should not waste his time. So the same way in companies, in software companies, now if you can go some WhatsApp or Facebook, some unauthorized things will be blocked. Only authorized means like their own company mails are allowed to be used. So in that case, what or how do they do? They introduce something called as a firewalls. Then process and threats. Process has two characteristics. That is resource ownership or schedule or execution. So what is resource ownership? On regular interval, a process will be allocated the control or ownership of the resource, like main memory. So what is this ownership we are doing? So on regular intervals, a process will be allocated the control or ownership of the resources like main memory, input output device, files, etc. The OS performs a protection function to prevent unwanted interface between process with respect to the resource. Scheduling or execution. The execution of the process follows an execution path through which one or more programs then OS will dispatch the process after the completion. So this is what is called as a process and a thread. So to distinguish the two characteristics, the unit of dispatching is usually referred to as a thread or lightweight process. The unit of resource ownership is referred to as process or task. Multi-threading, the ability of the OS to support multiple concurrent path of execution with a single process is called as multi-threading. The traditional approach of a single thread of execution per process, in which the concept of a thread is not recognized, is referred to as a single threaded approach. MS-DOS is an example of OS which supports single process and single thread. Some versions of Unix support multiple process but single thread per process. Java runtime environment supports multiple threads per single process. These are depicted in the figure. So what is multi-thread? Multi means many. So how do we have? So you can see that here there are four diagrams. First one is what you have one rectangular box. What we are calling that a square is, we call it as a one process. So within that process, how many threads are there? You can see like there is a snake-like object within that square. So what that we are calling, we are representing that as a thread. So you can see the first diagram, one square and one thread. That's what is called as a one process and one thread. And in the second image down to that you can see there are two processes. So multiple means many. So one, two, multiple process, two process. And how are those? Those are the squares. And how are within? So each one have a different threads. Multiple process, this is one process, this is one process, and within that there is one thread. So each one of them have multiple process, one thread per process. And here we have something called as a one process, multiple threads. So this is one process and there is a threads there. So how many threads are there? There are three threads within that. What is that? There is one process. So that is what one process, multiple threads. So and again down you can see multiple processes, multiple threads per process. So you can see in that case, how many processes are there? There are processes, two processes, and how many threads are there? There are three threads. So that's what is called as a multiple process, multiple threads.
Hello?
As threads per process. So in the fourth diagram, yes, Amresh.
Ma'am.
Yenappa?
Ma'am, screen visible illa.
Screen ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ವಾ?
Screen ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಿಲ್ಲ ma'am.
ಇವಾಗ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಪ್ಪ?
No ma'am.
ಒಂದು ನಿಮಿಷ. I'll just check.
Ma'am, ಇವಾಗ okay ma'am.
ಇವಾಗ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ? Okay. So in this diagram, what we are doing is threads and process. So in this case, there are four different images we have here. So one is one process, one thread, one process, multiple threads. So what is one process, one thread? Only one rectangular box and one thread. So in the down one, you can see two rectangular thing and two threads. And in the third diagram, you can see there is only one rectangular box. And with that rectangular box, we have three threads. So what are the three threads? Maybe any threads. So now I have opened two softwares. One is my online. So online, if I want to use a Google Meet, then I should on my Gmail. So then along with that, because I have to present for you people, then I will use my PPT. So that's what here we can see one process, multiple thread. And the fourth one you can see, I may create two processes. And I can create a number of threads. Similar like I have a work, but I am distributing for all second semester MCS. But how I am doing? I am doing a different groups. In that groups also, I give different projects. Something like that is a multi-process, multi-threads. Multi means what? Many. So in multiple threads, so in one process we have three threads. So the same way, I may create any number of processors. So that's what is called as a thread side the process. So in a multi-threaded environment, a process is defined as the unit of resource allocation and a unit of protection. Every process is associated with a virtual address space that holds the process image, protected access to the processor, other processes, files, and input-output resources. Within a process, there may be one or more threads, each with the following: an execution state, running, ready, etc. Saved thread context when not running, an execution stack, some per thread static storage for local variable, access to the memory and resource of its process. All threads of a process share this. So that's what is how we do it. Then the different, how do we differentiate between a thread and a process? So the difference between a thread and a process from the view of the management is a single thread process means there is no thread. A single thread process means in the first diagram which we have seen where we were having only one process and a one thread. In this model, the process includes its control block, user address space, and user or kernel stack. So that's what is called as a single threaded process. In multi-threaded model, there will be a separate control block for each thread, and all threads of one process share the state and the resource of that process. So that's what here a different multi-threaded thing will be doing. The difference between a thread and the process from the view of the process management is shown in the figure how we have done. In multi-thread, what we do, separate control block for each threads. So we can see here how a single threaded and a multi-threaded process is working. So you can see the first diagram where single threaded process model. So how this process control block is what each one. So now you have your USN number. Why do you have your USN number? To identify uniquely in the university, you have a USN number. In the same way here, to identify, because there are so many processors. Now I have opened PPT, now I have opened Google. So not only me, how many people are open now? At least for my class, some of you are there. So for all of you to use my thing, you have to log in into your account, your at least BMSIT official account. Then you should click on the link what I have sent. So in that case, what you want, we have require each identity. So the same way here, in a single threaded process, so process control block, user address space, user stack, and a kernel stack. So what is required in a single threaded? All these are required. So then multi-threaded process model. So each one. So now the first one, we have a process control block, then we have a user address space. So then multi-processor model, each one of them we have separately thread. You can suppose if we take, we have a 3 threads. One is a thread control block. Same way how we have a process control block, here also we have something called as a thread control block. We are creating a different threads. So multi-threaded process model. So in the first diagram, you can see there is only single thread, but it is shared between all the other things. Whereas in this case, in multi-threaded, each one of the thread will be having its own thread control block. Same way how we have a process control block, in the same way we have something called as a thread control block. What it is doing, a multi-threaded process model will be there. So in this diagram, at least we can see there are 3 threads and each of them have their own thread control block and user stack and a kernel stack. So that's what is a multi-threaded process model. Single threaded and multi-threaded process model. By doing this, what is a benefit of having a threads? Threads take a less time to create compared to a process. So what's the difference between a process and a thread? Maybe process will take some time more compared to a thread. So thread will take a less time. Thread takes less time to create compared to a process. It takes less time to create compared to a process. switching between two threads takes less time than switching process. So that's what is a switching will be done. Threads can communicate with each other without invoking the kernel. So that's what is a benefits of threads are. The usage of threads in a single user processing system are listed below. One is foreground and a background work, asynchronous processing, foreground and background work. For example, in a spreadsheet program, one thread may display menus and thread user inputs, whereas another thread may enter user commands and update the spreadsheet. So that's what is a single user multi-processing system. So in this case, what we have a foreground and a background. So what we are doing, so now suppose if you are doing any project, what you do, you require a front end, you require a back end. So what is front end is, so maybe some web pages what you have created. What is your background? You create a database. How many tables? Database means what? You are creating so many tables. So how many tables? One table, two table, again depends upon your project, you may change. So that's what a foreground and background work. For example, in a spreadsheet program, one thread may display menu and user and reader users input, whereas another thread may enter user commands and update the spreadsheet. So how this, with respect to your projects, how the threads are working? Maybe suppose you think that if it is a single means everything, front end, back end, connections, everything will be done by a only single thread. Suppose if we have multi-thread, means parallelly I want my work to be faster. So in that case, what we do, front end we can take one process, one thread, back end we can take one thread, connection also we can take one more thread. So similar like if I have one student, if I have asked one student to do all three, it will take some time. But if I give each student to create one front end, one student will be doing front end, one student will be doing back end, another student will be doing connection. In one day only, we can say all three will be done parallelly. Then we just connect it. Then it will be easier. Same way, multi-thread is what it will be doing so many processes simultaneously. Then asynchronous process, a thread may be created to save the Word document in a periodic interval, whereas other threads may be writing the data into the document. So that is what is called as a asynchronous processing. Speed of execution, a multi-threaded process can compute one batch of data while reading the next batch from the device. So that's what is a speed of execution. So then modular programming structure, programs that involve a variety of activities like input and output will be easier to design and implement using threads. So the speed of execution, same way, speed of execution, if one student is doing all complete project, he may take some months. So the same project, if it is distributed among 2 or 3 people, then the work will be faster. Same way here also, speed of execution will also increase. Definitely it will increase because it is many threads will be doing parallel work. Then speed of execution will be there. Then modular program structure, programs that involve a variety of activities like input and output will be easier to design and implement using threads. So that is what is called as a modular programming structure. Module means what? Each modules will be there and each activities will be done. Modular program structure, programs that involves a variety of activities like input, output will be easier to design and implement using the threads. Thread functionality, similar to process, threads also can have execution state and they may synchronize with another thread. So then thread states, the key state of threads are running, ready and blocked. So what are the different states of the thread? Same way how we have a process control block, same way here we have something called as a thread control block or a thread states. So what are the different states we have for a thread? We have a running, ready and a blocked. What is running means it is already started my thread. What is ready? Okay, it is supposed it will be in a position for ready to do some work. Then block means it will be waiting for some time, either maybe for input or either for your key press something. So then that is what is called as a block itself. But since all the threads share the same address space of the process, they may be swapped out within the process in a swapped out. So sometimes because we are using only one thing, so input and output can be done by a processor. So in that case, we need to swap in, swap out. So that's what we do with the threaded functionality. Hence, suspending a single thread makes no sense. So sometimes we need to suspend. So then we do a no sense for a thread functionality. There are 4 basic thread operations associated with a change in a thread state. One is span, block, unblock, and a finish. Span, when a new process is spanned, a thread for that process is also spanned. Also, a thread within a process may span another thread within the same process. Block, when thread need to wait for an event, it will be blocked. Unblock, when an event for which a thread was blocked occurs, the thread in a unblocked and moved into ready queue. Finish, when a thread completes its register and stacks, all stacks are deallocated. So that's what is a um, operations what the thread states are doing. One is span means switching from one process to another process. Block means waiting. Unblock, suppose you have blocked you because I want to start again, then we say it's a unblock. And if you have done your work, then we call it as a finish. So these are the different states of the thread. The next is thread synchronization. What is the synchronization? So you would have watched so many movies. Suppose sometime you think that you have a movie where it is a pirated. Means what? In that case, someone would have recorded or something would have done. So in that case, suppose if that movie shows, if you're seeing, then some picture is moving and voice is coming slow, then what? That is what is called as a synchronization. There is no proper synchronization between a picture and a voice. So the same way here, even in a threads also, there should be a communication between the threads. Then we call it as a thread synchronization. All the threads of the process share the same address space and other resources like files. So any alteration of the resource by one thread affects the behavior of other threads in the same process. Hence, it is necessary to synchronize the activities of various threads so that they do not interfere with each other. So that's what is called as the thread synchronization. Then user level and a kernel level threads. A thread can be implemented as either a user level thread or a kernel level thread. So what is this user level thread and a kernel level thread? Now suppose if you are doing any project and you have created a front end, then you are using a threads. Then that is what is called as a user level thread. Suppose when you are using a operating system, that's what kernel, in that case a thread is created. Then we call it as a kernel level thread. User level and a kernel level thread. A thread can be implemented as either a user level thread ULT or kernel level thread KLT. So KLT is also known as kernel supported thread or lightweight processor. That's what is a user level and a kernel level thread. What is this user level thread? In ULT, all work of thread management is done by the application and the kernel is not aware of the existence of a thread. It is shown in figure. So 2.12a, an application can be programmed to a multi-threaded by using a thread library, which is a package for a ULT management. Usually, so the application with a single thread and begins running in that thread. This application and its thread are allocated to a single process management by the kernel. So the application may span a new thread within the same process during its execution, but the kernel is not aware of this activity. The advantage of ULT compared to KLT are given below. So how do we compare user level thread and kernel level thread? Thread switching does not require kernel mode privilege. Hence, the overhead of two switches, user to kernel and kernel back to user, is saved. Scheduling can be application specific or operating scheduling not disturbed. So ULT can run on any OS. There are certain disadvantages of ULTs compared to KLT. Usually in OS, many system calls are blocked. So when ULT executes a system call, all the threads within the process are blocked. In a pure ULT, a multi-threaded application cannot change the advantage of multi-processing. So in this diagram, we can see ULT and KLT. So what is ULT? User level thread and a kernel level thread. So what is user space and a kernel space? So kernel space means what? Your operating system. Then what is thread space or a thread library? So then user space and a kernel space. In that case, you can see 3 threads where parallelly it will be running. That's what is called as a thread library. So and here you can see pure kernel levels. So operating system and 3 different threads are created in a kernel. So whereas in the first diagram you can see threads are created in the program or a user space. Whereas in the second diagram you can see it is created in the kernel. So threads are created in the kernel itself. And here in this case, in the third diagram, it is combined. It is combined where the multi-threads are created both in user space as well as in a kernel space. So in the user space, what we do, even a threads multi-process is also created in a user space and even in a kernel space. That is what is called as a combined between these two. What is a kernel level thread? In a pure KLT model, all work of thread management is done by the kernel. Thread management code will not be in the application level. This model is shown in the figure. We have just seen all the 3 figures. The first one, what it says, what was the first one? Where multi-threads are created in a user space, means user can create. Same way in the second diagram, what we have seen, it is created by the kernel. Kernel means operating system. In the third diagram, what we have could see is it is created by both. Both means user space or kernel space. Here both parallelly multi-threads are created by a kernel as well as a user space. So that's what the explanation here. So then a relationship between a threads and the process. So what is the relationship between a thread and a process? The interrelationship between threads and the process has been listed below. So then we can see how is the relationship between one-to-one. So each process, each one thread, one process. Then we call it as a one-to-one. Each thread of execution is a unique process with its own address space and a resource. That is what is called as a one-to-one. So in many-to-one, so many people and one. A process defines an address space and dynamic resource ownership. Multiple threads may be created and executed within that process. Many to one. So then one to many, one to many. A thread may migrate from one process environment to another. This allows a thread to be easily moved among distinct systems. That's what is called as a one to many. And the last one is many to many. Many to many means I may have many threads combined for many processes. So that's what we have seen in all 3 diagrams. What we have seen, a single thread means only one process, one thread. That is what an example for the relationship one-to-one. And we have seen many to one, many threads but one processor. That's what is second relationship. And the third relationship, I have a one thread, but within one thread I may have I would have created many processors. Different 2 or 3 processors are there. Within that I have only one thread. So that many to many, I may create more processors and more threads. So that is the relationship between a thread and the process. Symmetric multi-programming. Symmetric means what? Traditionally, the computer has been viewed as a sequential machine. Sequential machine means what? One after the other. That is, a processor executes instruction one at a time in a sequence, and each instruction is a sequence of operations. But as computer technology has evolved, parallel processing got importance. So what is this parallel processing? Different parallel processors are created. So that's what is called as a symmetric multi-processor. One of the popular approach for providing parallelism is symmetric multiprocessor. That's what is called as a SMPS, where processors are replicated. I may have n number of processors. So in this case, we can see SMP architecture. Before we move on further, we would just see what is the architecture of a parallel processor. Before understanding how SMP works, it is better to observe all parallel processor which are depicted in the figure. So parallel processor, how it is classified? It is classified as a single instruction, multiple data stream, or multiple instruction, multiple data stream. Again, that is being divided into a shared memory that is tightly coupled, then distributed memory loosely coupled, then shared is master or slave, or symmetric multiprocessor system, that is what SMP, or a cluster. So that's what is called as a SMP architecture. Then parallel processor architecture. Here you can see single instruction, single data stream. A single processor executes a single instruction stream to operate on data stored in a single memory. Single instruction, multiple data stream. Each instruction is executed on a different set of data by a different processor. Multiple instruction, multiple instruction, single data stream. A sequence of data is transmitted to a set of processor, each of execute a different instruction sequence. Then multiple instruction, multiple data. A set of processors simultaneously execute different instruction executions on a different data sets. So that's what is a SMP architecture. So I'll stop here. We see when we can take further classes, because from tomorrow you have a OSC. So I may assume that from next Monday again my class we do a revision will be there. Okay, stop here and we'll continue with the next class.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.